When it comes to a shonen anime, we see the start of a major arc is usually peaceful and then a big bad villain shows up, such as Dragon Ball, where they have this grace period and then Raz shows up. Usually every shonen follows this very concept, and I'm here to talk about a certain show that has amazingly animated fights but actually not that good a fight in reality. Now I will admit that these are all personal opinions. So these will not be facts at all. Some fights that come to mind that are amazing is Jotaro vs. Dio, where there's tons of strategy going back and forth. Gaara vs. Rock Lee, where we see them going back and forth, the mindset of the underdog versus natural talent. One of my personal favorite themes in all of anime, but it's kind of overdone at this point. Amazing flexes. They show flashbacks. It's a fight between two extremes who bring out the match of each other. Lee did lose the fight, and this made me feel things for the character. Lee has worked extremely hard, but Gaara was just an extreme with natural talent. The main reason I love this fight is because of the morale. This shows you that you have to accept reality, but that you can get extremely far in the world. But now is time to get into what I would call overrated fights or meh fights, or even some bad ones, obviously. The first show I would talk about in this series will be My Hero Academia, one of the most popular anime out there right now. There are some good fights in My Hero Academia, I will admit that, such as Mirio vs. Overhaul in the manga, Mirio vs. Class 1A. Both the anime was pretty alright, but the manga was pretty top tier. Deku vs. Todoroki, but they do have some bad ones. One of the first fights like this that I would like to go over is All For One vs. All Might. We know that this fight was well animated and had a lot of stakes to it, but it wasn't a great fight, because it seems like the main hero will only win with pure emotions and no backstory will take place in this fight. This fight was one of those fights that was amazing to watch, but nothing else. It wasn't a memorable fight, such as like Levi vs. the Beast Titan in Season 3, Part 2. That was an amazing fight, even though it lasted a minute, but it was way better than this fight that was only good because of the animations. The reflecting that Levi was doing on the Beast Titan, the animations, and everything was there, including the states. But when it comes to All Might versus All For One, we only know the states that were there. The states of All Might dying, the people in the city getting killed, Bakugo getting kidnapped. All that was there, yes. But I thought that this fight had no meaning to it. It seemed like they were like, okay, time to introduce All For One for the first time. Also, by the way, we're now going to have this ultimate climactic fight that should have occurred later in the series, but we're going to have it now. Honestly, we got no reasoning of why All For One is there, or why he was doing this. Why did he show up out of nowhere? Oh yeah, he had one reason why he created Shigaraki, was just to piss off All Might. Really? Was because it's the daughter, the grandson, or whatever, the son of his former teacher? Yeah, we're going to torment him. That's it. Now, all we know about him at this point was that he existed and was the ultimate enemy of All Might. That was it. This fight seemed like Kage vs. Team 7 in Naruto. Almost pointless. No meaning behind it. But they had great animations, okay? That should make up for it, right? It seemed like they only sped up the process of the introduction of All For One and did nothing with the character. Honestly, they should have spent a little bit more time with All For One. He is supposed to be the main villain. Well, other than Shigaraki, they should have spent a little bit more time with him. Yes, we get hints of his story later on and Shigaraki's story and all that, but that's it. We don't see too much of anything else. To be honest, that was the point of this fight. To pass Deku, who was a shitty protagonist after Season 2, the torch, and to make a shift in the world. Cause, personally, that was all I felt during this fight. Any casual anime watcher would say that this fight was amazing because of the states and animations. But in reality, it was just meh. There was nothing special. Like I said before, it just reminds me of Kaguya vs. Team 7. This fight had meaning to the story going forward, yes. But that was it. We still know nothing about All For One entirely. This fight seemed like it was done just for the audience's enjoyment and to move the plot forward, which is fine, but was just done poorly. But it doesn't do that. We still see training arcs directly after major arc. This is the main problem with My Hero Academia, which I understand. They're students. But every time we see a major arc, there's a training or festival arc directly after it. There was nothing immensely special about this fight. It seemed like a basic end of a major arc fight to move the story on. No flashbacks were given in it, like we saw in Gaara vs. Rock Lee or Kakashi vs. Obito. No story behind it at all. The fight itself was shorter than it should have been. It was a struggle for All Might, yes, but with the power of wanting to protect the people, he was able to pull a victory out of his ass. Now, before you get upset with me, this wasn't the only fight like this that was dumb or meh. Next, we have a fight that occurred recently that people loved. This fight was Deku vs. Overhaul. A fight that was stunning and amazing in this season. But some fights that should have been a lot more better animated that I saw in the manga that was almost gorgeous to watch. Miro vs. Overhaul. My favorite fight in the entire series got ruined to just pictures. I'm not even joking. Then we have Kirishima and Fat Gum versus the 2 gang members. That was a great fight. We saw Kirishima's backstory for the first time. We saw his development as a character in that fight. He went out of his way to do it. Sunny versus the 3 other gang members. That was a brilliant fight. We saw the development of Sunny. Same thing with Miro versus Overhaul. Miro, we saw him in a pure rage. Him being terrified that he couldn't protect Eri the first time and wanted to reunite that flame. And honestly, if I had to be honest, the Miro fight was the highlight of this entire arc. They should have just ended with that one. But those fights had meaning behind each of them. They have flashbacks of the character, help them motivate them. I mean, obviously, flashbacks don't make a great fight, but they can help improve it. Such as Kakashi versus Obito. When they go back and forth and you see the childhood of them fighting back. Even with Naruto versus Sasuke, the final fight, which isn't my favorite fight in Naruto, but it was still good. Each of these fights, especially Miro versus Overhaul, has some type of strategy to overcome their opponent. Then we have our main protagonist over here taking the dub from Miro with no strategy whatsoever. It's like, my fish go whoop whoop and my fish go bam. But speaking of the protagonist, Izuku Midoriya Deku, this next fight involves Deku vs. Overhaul. I know it's a repeat from before, but now we begin to wonder why it's actually quite trash. So when it comes to this fight, it is actually kind of similar to the All for One versus All Might, but also extremely different in different ways as well. This fight was hyped up by the readers of the manga, which I have read the manga, but was after season 4. The opening of this arc led into the Deku versus Overhaul fight. Everything led to that fight. I heard people calling it spectacular. So this fight is similar to the first fight mentioned above because of how they look. I mean, it's wonderfully animated fight, and I thought that this fight was kind of trash. The main reason, in my opinion, is simply because the fight was just meh. Like most of Deku's fights, they end like it's similar to most other shonen, because it of course ends with the protagonist winning with the power of friendship and pure emotion. It seems like no strategy was involved. I mean, Deku was hyped up at the beginning of the show that he knows almost all the quirks, had no quirks, took notes on them, and improvised with that plan. Well, up until he got One for All and only focused on emotion and protecting people using the most basic bitch way to fight and ending fights with one punch. This fight ended with Deku getting mad at Overhaul for hurting Eri, hurting Night Eye, hurting Miro, and almost every one of his friends. So with the power of protecting Eri, he will defeat Overhaul and change the future. Oh man, like every shonen ever. This fight had almost a similar meaning behind it, like All for One versus All Might, where, oh, he has to protect this girl. If I had to say which one moved the plot forward, it would be the All for One versus All Might fight. And still it wasn't good. You can't animate trash and get perfection. This fight wasn't trash, but it wasn't good. It was only meh at the very bare minimum of entertaining. Now I understand why you would have Deku finish it, even though Miro was destroying Overhaul. Miro didn't allow his emotions to take control of him. Miro was upset, but knew he had to strategize to actually defeat Overhaul and save Eri. When he ends up losing and having a much worse situation, then Big Boy Protag comes in to save the day. Deku decides to finally use the most OP quirk and actually go from using only 10% of the power to using his full percent, but of course that will break his bones. But guess what? Eri is able to reverse times, luckily, and make Deku recover from his injuries faster than he can mate them, obviously. Epic. Now he can take down Overhaul. Overhaul becomes super OP, and then Deku's like, yeah, I'm more OP, dude. But here's how the fight entirely goes. Overhaul was getting his ass beat by Miro. He then defeats Miro, then severely hurts Night Eye. Night Eye sees Midoriya's death in the future, but of course the main protagonist will not die because he's the main protagonist. So yeah, Midoriya is now extremely upset now. Oh yeah, Eri did leave with the injured Miro, but came back for some reason. Deku was just like, Eri, come on, and I can save you, man, come on. So Deku gets injured in the leg, but started to promise to change the future and protect Eri. You know, the usual Protag lines. He then smashes a rival and goes to a fight. Overhaul Wizard Courts at 20%. He is having trouble beating him, so let's use this most broken OP quirk of all time and uses it at 100%, completely annihilating Overhaul. Well, yes, they have states such as like Eri could be dead. Eri could defeat defeat it. Midoriya can die. But we all know he ain't gonna die because the very first episode states,
"Oh, by the way, this is the story of how I became the world's greatest hero."
The other fights in this season were so much better than the most climactic fight of them all. I mean, this fight just seemed forced, and they didn't want anyone but the main protagonist to win this fight. I mean, I would have had a great time with Mirio ending it if they were willing to actually end it there. But I think Mirio's fight was great for the character. But I was fine with the main protagonist actually doing something useful, but this fight just wasn't good. I mean, can you blame me? I was barely entertained. I thought to myself, why Midoriya has to win using emotions and not actually use any of his knowledge of quirks? Because it seems like, oh, season 1, season 2, it seems like they're putting more emphasis on that, and then season 3 they're like, yeah, he has big fish that go bam. That's it. I mean, this man starts out with no quirk, bitching about it, and gets All Might to give him the most broken quirk ever and most overpowered quirk of all time, and we see him never pick up his book of quirks again. He really doesn't analyze quirks, I mean, mostly after season 2, at least. So the summary of the two fights is that All For One versus All Might seemed too soon, and Overhaul versus Deku was just underwhelming. I was hoping for an amazing climactic fight, even though it is My Hero Academia. But you want to know mangas with great fights? One Piece, Berserk, Black Clover. But those are clearly better than My Hero. The next fight I would like to speak about is Muscular versus Deku. Now, this fight had just the same amount of meaning behind it as Overhaul versus Deku. Deku fought Muscular to save Koda from him and to protect him, but this man is way too powerful. This fight was still meh, the animations were there, but we see Deku somewhat strategize his way out of this fight, but also doesn't at the same time. I mean, in this fight, we see Deku clearly lose to him. How this man was able to take one for all at 100% beats me. All I know is that Deku goes 1,000,000% to beat him. This is one of those fights that was solved around emotions alone. But my only problem was that they made this man way too strong. But this show doesn't just make him strong. When Deku had no control over the quirk and was using 100% of his power against Todoroki, who was only using, 50% of his powers on his ice side, Todoroki was able to overcome this OP quirk with only 50% of his power, but did have to finish it with almost 100%. I believe that made Todoroki way too strong in the arc, being able to go toe-to-toe with the most overpowered, most broken, and #1 quirk of all time. This was similar to Muscular. If Deku were to finish them both off with 100%, then it wouldn't be great fights at all. But he struggles against an opponent only using 8% of his power, then jumps up to, 10%, and that makes the story and fight better, right? The fight wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. We see him save Koda and at the end, but it was completely broken. They made a show and proclaimed that Deku is an underdog. Since when? He was originally he had no quirk whatsoever, but given the most #1 OP quirk of all time, and he has to work hard to be able to control this quirk. It is proclaimed as an underdog story? It's like telling me that Superman was an underdog. None of these fights were terrible, other than probably the All Might versus All For One, because it made no goddamn sense. But most of these fights were all meh fights. They weren't trash, but they weren't good. They were all mildly entertaining. Now, with all that out of the way, we will end this video of the new series off here. This specific series will cover terrible or meh fights that are overhyped, and some that aren't overhyped but are just trash. I might go into my favorite anime fights of all time, but thank you guys so much for sticking with me. If you guys get this to 8 likes within the first 2 days, I will publish the second one of this series within a week. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button with the Oklahoma smash at the bottom of the screen. Detroit, smash that bell to always stay notified, and don't forget to subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. And remember to fly high.